Captain Lee kicked through the twisted metal of the crashed ship. Smoke filled his lungs as he searched for survivors. The distress signal had been weak, but something made him come anyway. Maybe it was instinct. Maybe it was duty. He had seen too many good people die in empty space. The ship was small, probably a family transport. Scorch marks covered the hull where Empire fighters had attacked it. Lee knew those burn patterns well. He had been fighting the Empire for 15 years, ever since they destroyed his home colony. They never left witnesses. A soft crying sound made him stop. It came from behind a collapsed wall panel. Lee pulled away the debris with his bare hands, cutting his palms on sharp edges. He did not care about the pain. What he found made his heart skip. A woman sat against the wall holding two small children. Her skin was pale blue like morning sky, and her hair moved like it was underwater even though there was no wind. She was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, but blood ran down her face and arms. Her breathing was shallow and quick. The children could not be more than 5 years old. They had their mother's blue skin and floating hair. Their big eyes stared at Lee with fear and confusion. They had never seen a human before. "Please," the woman whispered in broken standard. Her voice was like music, even through the pain. "Please help my babies." Lee knelt down slowly. He did not want to scare them more. "I am here to help," he said softly. "What happened?" "Empire ships," she gasped. "They hunt us, kill all my people. We ran, but—" She looked at her bleeding wounds. "I am dying." The children pressed closer. To their mother. The little boy, who looked like the older twin, touched her face gently. The girl just stared at Lee with wide, frightened eyes. "My name is Yuna," the woman continued. "These are Minho and Gina. They are all that is left." Tears ran down her cheeks. "I heard humans adopt children. Any children, even aliens." Lee felt something tight in his chest. He had no family left. The Empire had taken them all, but these were not his people. They were not even his species. "You want me to take them?" he asked. "Empire will not stop hunting," Yuna said. "But humans fight different. Humans fight like demons when children are in danger. Please be their father. Save them." She reached out with a shaking hand and touched Lee's arm. Her skin was cold and soft. "I have nothing to give you, only them. But they are good children, smart children. They will love you if you let them." Minho said something in his own language. It sounded like a question. Yuna answered him gently, then turned back to Lee. "He asks if you are a warrior." I told him yes. "The strongest kind." She coughed, and more blood appeared. "Will you do this? Will you be their family?" Lee looked at the two small faces watching him. They did not understand the words, but they knew their mother was asking something important, something that would change everything. Outside, his ship waited. He could take them aboard, feed them, protect them. But that meant war with the Empire would follow him everywhere. It meant never being safe again. He thought about his own father, who had died protecting their colony, about the promise every human made to guard the innocent. "Yes," Lee said. "I will take them." Lee carried Yuna to his ship while the children followed close behind. Her breathing was getting worse with each step. He could feel her life slipping away, but he kept moving. His medical kit might help. It had to help. The twins walked in silence, holding hands. Minho kept looking back at the burning wreckage of their ship. Gina stayed close to her brother, her small fingers wrapped around his. They moved like ghosts, too scared to make noise. Lee's ship was small but clean. He laid Yuna on his own bed and started working on her wounds. The medical scanner beeped and flashed red warnings. Internal bleeding, broken ribs, burns from the crash. Too much damage for his basic supplies to fix. "Mama," Minho whispered, climbing onto the bed. He touched his mother's face with tiny hands. Yuna opened her eyes and smiled at him. She spoke in their language, words that sounded like singing. Lee did not understand, but he could hear the love in her voice. She was telling them she loved them, that everything would be okay. Alarms started screaming outside. Lee ran to the window and cursed. 3 Empire fighters were coming fast, their weapons already charging. They had found the crash site. "We have to go now," Lee said, running back to Yuna. She grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "Take them," she whispered. "Promise me." "I already promised," Lee said. He started the ship's engines and felt it lift off the ground. The first laser blast hit the side of his ship. Lee threw himself over the bed, covering Yuna and the children. The lights went out for a second, then came back on. His shields were holding, but not for long. More blasts rocked the ship. Lee crawled to the pilot's seat and started flying. The Empire fighters were fast, but his ship knew how to run. He dove between two mountains and rolled left, dodging another. "Volley of shots! Mama!" Gina cried out. Lee looked back. Yuna was sitting up, blood running from her mouth. But she was smiling at her children and speaking in that musical language again. This time it sounded like a song, like a lullaby. The children held her hands and listened. Tears ran down their faces, but they stayed quiet. They knew this was goodbye. One of the Empire fighters got too close. Lee pulled his ship into a sharp turn and fired back. The fighter exploded in a ball of fire. The other two backed off, probably calling for help. When Lee looked back again, Yuna was still. Her eyes were closed, and her hands rested on her children's. Heads like a blessing. The twins sat perfectly still, holding onto her arms. "She is gone," Minho said quietly in Standard. His first words to Lee. The silence stretched out. Lee flew his ship toward the jump point while the children sat with their mother. He did not know what to say. Sorry seemed too small. Everything would be okay was a lie. Finally, he shut off the engines and turned around. The twins looked at him with empty eyes. They were orphans now, alone in a universe that wanted them dead. Lee knelt down in front of them. He had never been a father, never even thought about children. But looking at Minho and Gina, something changed inside him. Something that felt like steel. "I am Lee," he said slowly. "I will take care of you now. I will keep you safe, I promise." He did not know if they understood all the words, but when he opened his arms, they came to him. Two small, frightened children trusting a stranger because they had no choice. As they hugged him, Lee made a silent vow. The Empire had taken their mother. They would not take anything else. The first week was hard. Minho and Gina would not eat human food. They sat at Lee's small table and stared at the protein bars and water like it might poison them. Their stomachs growled, but they were too scared to try anything new. Lee tried everything. He made the food look prettier. He ate it first to show it was safe. He even tried mixing it with the few alien foods he had in storage. Nothing worked. Finally, he got an idea. He sat down and started telling them a story about a brave warrior who shared his food with lost travelers. Lee acted out the whole thing, making funny voices and pretending to fight invisible enemies. The children giggled for the first time since their mother died. While they were laughing, Lee handed them small pieces of food. Without thinking, they ate it. Problem solved. Sleeping was harder. The twins were used to floating beds that moved. Like water. Lee's human beds were too solid and still. They would lie awake for hours, whispering to each other in their own language. So Lee moved his sleeping mat to the floor and slept there too. If the bed was wrong, they would all sleep wrong. Together. After a few nights, the children joined him on the floor. They slept better when they could hear his breathing. Months passed like this. Lee learned that Minho was curious about everything. The boy would follow him around the ship, asking questions in broken Standard mixed with his own language. How does this work? Why does that move? Can I touch it? Lee started teaching him simple repairs. Minho's small hands could reach places Lee could not. His alien eyes could see things that looked wrong to him but normal to humans. He was natural at fixing things. "This wire is sick," Minho said one day, pointing at a cable that looked fine to Lee. But when Lee checked it with his scanner, the cable was failing. Minho could somehow sense when machines were not healthy. Gina was different. She was quiet and watched everything. But Lee noticed she copied his movements when she thought he was not looking. If he stretched in the morning, she would stretch too. If he checked his weapon, she would pretend to check an imaginary gun. So Lee started teaching her to fight. Not real fighting, just basic moves to make her feel strong. How to stand, how to move her feet, how to keep her balance. She was fast, faster than any human child he had ever seen. Her alien reflexes made her movements look like dancing. When she practiced the combat forms Lee showed her, it was beautiful and deadly at the same time. "Good," Lee would tell her. "Now show me again." She would beam with pride and do it perfectly. The breakthrough came 4 months after they left the crash site. Lee was fixing a broken scanner when Minho crawled under the control panel to help. The boy said something in his language, then stopped and looked embarrassed. "I mean, Appa, can you hand me the small tool?" Lee's hands stopped moving. Appa, the Korean word for father. He had taught them a few Korean words along with standard, not thinking much of it. But they had chosen that one to keep. "Here you go, son," Lee said, handing him the tool. Gina looked up from where she was practicing her moves. "Appa, watch this." She did a perfect spinning kick that would have impressed his old drill sergeant. "Very good, daughter," Lee said. That night, as they ate dinner together on the floor like always, Lee realized something had changed. He was not just keeping these children safe anymore. He loved them, really loved them, like they were his own blood. When Minho fell asleep with his head on Lee's shoulder and Gina curled up against his other side, Lee understood what Yuna had known. Family was not about having the same DNA. It was about choosing to love someone and never letting go. Lee knew they were being followed when his friend Captain Park stopped answering messages. Park had been helping them get supplies on the outer rim planets. He was careful and smart. If Park went quiet, something was very wrong. "We need to move," Lee told the twins as he started the ship's engines. They were on a small trading station buying food and fuel. "Now!" Minho looked up from the engine part he was fixing. At 8 years old now, he could repair things better than most trained mechanics. "Bad people coming?" he asked. "Maybe," Lee said. He did not want to scare them, but they needed to know. "Pack everything. Fast." As they left the station, Lee's scanner picked up 3 ships following them. They stayed far back, but they matched every turn he made. Professional tracking. Military style. The next week, Lee lost contact with 2 more friends. Then his weapons dealer went missing. Someone was cutting off all his connections, one by one. Lee started sleeping with his gun next to his pillow. He taught the twins emergency procedures. If anything happened to him, they should hide in the secret compartment he built. They should wait for his friend General Kim to find them, but even General Kim stopped responding to messages. "Appa," Gina said one morning. She was 9 now, tall and quick like her mother. "Someone is thinking about us." Lee looked at her strangely. "What do you mean?" "I can feel it," she said, touching her head. "Like when you worry about us, but different. Angry thinking, hunting thinking." Minho nodded. "I feel it too, like a cold wind in my head." That was when Lee realized the twins were changing. Their alien abilities were growing stronger as they got older. Minho could sense emotions from far away. Gina could do something else, something she had not shown him yet. He found out what during their next stop. They were buying supplies on a mining planet when bounty hunters cornered them in an alley. 4 men with heavy weapons, all aiming at the children. "Empire wants them alive," the leader said. "You can walk away, human." "No," Lee said simply. He put himself between the hunters and his children. The shooting started fast. Lee dove behind a metal container and pulled out his pistol. The hunters had better weapons and more men. This was going to be close. Then something impossible happened. A wall of blue light appeared around Minho and Gina. The hunters' laser blasts hit it and bounced off harmlessly. The light came from Gina's hands, flowing out like water but hard as steel. "Whoa," Minho whispered. Lee used the distraction to take down 2 hunters. The other 2 ran when they saw their shots doing nothing against Gina's barrier. "How long have you been able to do that?" Lee asked as they hurried back to their ship. "Since last month," Gina said, "but only when we are scared." "I did not want to worry you, Appa," Minho added. "We are still us." Lee hugged them both. "You will always be my children, powers or no powers." But he was worried now. If the twins had abilities this strong, the Empire would never stop hunting them. They would keep coming with bigger ships and more men until they got what they wanted. That night, Lee received a message on an old military channel. The sender was Commander Rexa of the Empire Fleet. "Captain Lee," her cold voice said, I know you have the children. I know what they can do. You cannot hide forever. Surrender them now, and I will let you live. Keep running, and I will make you watch as I dissect them to learn their secrets." Lee deleted the message and changed course for the furthest edge. Thou've known space. But he knew she was right about one thing. Running was not working anymore. Soon he would have to make a stand. The question was where and how, and whether he could keep his promise to a dying mother when the Empire's full might came hunting for his children. The fuel gauge showed empty when Lee's ship limped into Outpost 7. The mining station floated in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dead asteroids and broken dreams. It was the kind of place people went to disappear. "We can hide here while I fix the hyperdrive," Lee told the twins as they docked. The station was old and crowded, full of miners and traders who minded their own business. But they had been there only 2 hours when the alarms started screaming. Lee ran to the observation deck and felt his heart sink. Empire ships were dropping, out of hyperspace all around the station. Dozens of them, fighters, cruisers, and one massive battleship that blocked out the stars. "Attention, mining station," Commander Rex's voice boomed over the speakers. "You are harboring fugitives. Surrender. The alien children, and no one else will be harmed." The station manager, a tough old woman named Boss Chen, grabbed Lee's arm. "What did you bring to my station?" she demanded. Before Lee could answer, Minho appeared beside them. At 10 years old, he was small, but his eyes were serious. "Upper, they are scared," he said, touching his head. "All the people here, I can feel their fear." "They should be scared," Boss Chen said. "That's a whole Empire fleet out there." Gina joined them, her hands already glowing with soft blue light. "We should leave," she said, "before they hurt innocent people." "No," Lee said firmly. "Our ship is broken. We would not make it past their fighters." "Then we surrender," Boss Chen said. "I am not letting my people die for your problems. They will not stop at just us," Lee replied. He had fought the Empire long enough to know how they worked. "They will destroy this station anyway. Can't leave witnesses." As if to prove his point, Empire fighters started firing warning shots at the station's docking bays. People screamed and ran for the emergency shelters. "This is our last warning," Rexa announced. "Send out the children or we begin bombardment." Lee looked at Minho and Gina. They were just kids, but they had learned human stubbornness over the years. He could see the decision in their eyes before they spoke. "We are not hiding anymore, Appa," Minho said. "We are tired of running. If we have to fight, we fight together," Gina added. "Like a family." Boss Chen stared at them. "You three against a whole fleet? You are crazy." "Maybe," Lee said, checking his weapons. "But we are not giving up." The first real attack came 30 minutes later. Empire soldiers blasted through the main docking port, their armor gleaming and weapons ready. They moved in perfect formation, expecting easy targets. They found Lee waiting for them instead. The human warrior had prepared the battlefield like his old military training taught him. Blocked passages here, cover positions there, escape routes, marked in case things went bad. But this time he was not alone. Minho sat in the station's control room, his alien senses reaching out to track every Empire soldier. 20 coming down Corridor C, he told Lee through their comm system. 12 more taking the upper route. The boy's telepathic abilities had grown stronger with practice. He could feel the emotions and intentions of everyone within a kilometer. It was like having a perfect radar that showed not just where enemies were, but what they planned to do next. "Got it," Lee whispered back, moving into position. The Empire soldiers never knew what hit them. Lee struck from the shadows, using Minho's information to be always one step ahead. When they zigged, he was already there. When they tried to flank, he had moved again. But the real surprise came when they tried to threaten the civilians. A squad of soldiers herded a group of miners into the main plaza, using them as human shields. "Come out now or these people die," their captain shouted. That was when Gina stepped into the open. Blue energy flowed from her hands like living water, forming a protective dome around the miners. The Empire soldiers fired at her with everything they had, but their weapons could not penetrate her barrier. "Impossible," the captain breathed. "You should not threaten families," Gina said calmly. Her voice carried the cold determination she had learned from her human father. What happened next became legend on the Outer Rim. A 10-year-old alien girl and her adopted human father held off an entire Empire battalion. Minho coordinated their defense from the control room, while Gina protected everyone Lee could not reach. Together they turned a mining station into a fortress. The Empire kept sending more soldiers, but it did not matter. Lee fought with the desperate fury of a father protecting his children. The twins used their growing powers not for revenge, but to shield the innocent. They had learned the human way of war: never give up, never surrender, and always protect those who cannot protect themselves. By the time reinforcements arrived to help the station, the Empire fleet was retreating in disorder. Commander Rex's perfect plan had been shattered by a family that refused to break. The Empire soldiers were regrouping for another attack when something unexpected happened. New ships appeared at the edge of the system, but these were not Empire vessels. They were old, patched-together craft that looked like they had been through a dozen wars. "Unknown ships, identify yourselves," Boss Chen called out from the station's control room. "This is Captain Dex of the free ship Wanderer," came the reply. The voice sounded like gravel mixed with music. "We heard there was a human here who fights. 4 alien children. We came to help." Lee felt his throat tighten. Through the observation window he could see the approaching ships more clearly now. They carried the markings of a dozen different alien species, refugees and survivors from worlds the Empire had destroyed. "How did they know we were here?" Gina asked, still maintaining her protective barrier around the frightened miners. Minho closed his eyes and reached out with his abilities. "They are happy," he said with surprise, "and grateful. They have been looking for us." More ships kept arriving. Some were barely holding together. Others looked like they had been built from spare parts. But they all moved with purpose, taking positions around the mining station. Captain Dex's ship docked, and Lee got his first look at their unexpected ally. Dex was tall and thin, with 4 arms and skin that changed colors when he moved. His people had been wiped out 2 years ago, but somehow he had survived. "We have been hearing stories," Dex said, his voice filled with emotion. "About a human warrior who took alien children as his own, who fights the Empire to protect them." "Stories travel fast in refugee camps," added another voice. This came from Captain Nera, whose ship had just arrived. She was short and covered in scales that gleamed like jewels. "Parents tell their children about the human who proves that family is about love, not blood." Lee felt overwhelmed. All his life he had fought alone. Now he was surrounded by aliens who had come across half the galaxy to stand with him. "You should not risk your lives for us," Lee said. "You risk your life for children who are not your species," Dex replied. "This is what good people do. We stand together." The Empire fleet was getting restless. Commander Rex's voice crackled. Over the communications again. "Surrender now, or we will destroy everyone on that station." "Let them try," Nera said with a sharp smile that showed too many teeth. What followed was unlike any battle Lee had ever seen. The refugee ships fought, with desperate creativity, using tactics the Empire had never encountered. They worked together like a pack, covering each other's weaknesses and striking where the Empire was not expecting. Dex's ship could become invisible for short periods. Nera's vessel shot nets that wrapped around Empire fighters. Another ship, commanded by a blob-like creature named Gull, somehow made Empire weapons malfunction just by getting close to them. But the real turning point came when Minho made a discovery. "Appa," the boy said through their comm system. "I can feel all of them. Our new friends, their emotions, their thoughts. They are sharing them with me." "What do you mean?" Lee asked, ducking behind cover as Empire soldiers tried to retake the plaza. "They want to fight as one family," Minho explained. "Like we do. I can connect everyone together." And that was exactly what happened. Minho's telepathic abilities reached out to every refugee ship, every defender on the station. Suddenly, they were not dozens of separate fighters. They were one massive family, all working together with perfect coordination. Lee felt it too, the connection, the shared purpose. When he moved, the others knew where he was going. When Gina raised her barriers, the ships knew exactly where to position themselves for maximum protection. The Empire had never faced anything like this before. Their rigid military tactics were useless against opponents who could read each other's thoughts and move as one mind. Commander Rex's flagship took heavy damage trying to break through the coordinated defense. Her smaller ships were being picked off one by enemies who seemed to predict every move. "Retreat," she finally ordered, her voice full of rage and disbelief. "Fall back to hyperspace." As the Empire fleet limped away, the mining station erupted in cheers. Boss Chen hugged Li with tears in her eyes. The refugee captains gathered around Minho and Gina, talking excitedly in a dozen different languages. "Word will spread about this day," Dex said to Li. "The Empire thought they could hunt children forever, but they learned that humans do not abandon family, and neither do we." Nira nodded. "We will tell everyone we meet. The human Li does not just adopt alien children. He adopts anyone who needs a family." Looking around at all the different faces, human, alien, young, old, Li realized that Yuna's dying wish had become something bigger than either of them had imagined. What started as a promise to protect 2 orphaned children had grown into a movement that could change the galaxy. The Empire might come back with more ships, but they would never again find Li's family standing alone. 3 years had passed since the battle at Outpost 7, and everything had changed. What started as one man protecting 2 children had grown into something the Empire feared more than any rebellion. Li stood on the bridge of their new base, a massive space station built from salvaged ships and pure determination. Through the windows, he could see dozens of vessels coming and going, refugee families bringing their children to safety, traders selling supplies, former Empire soldiers who had decided to switch sides. "Appa, the morning training is ready," Gina called out behind him. Li turned to see his adopted daughter, now 15 years old and taller than him. She moved with the fluid grace of her alien heritage, but her eyes held the steady determination he had taught her. In her hands was a training staff that hummed with controlled energy. "How many today?" Li asked. 43 kids, Minho answered, appearing beside his sister. At 15, he was still shorter than Gina, but twice as clever. His telepathic abilities had grown so strong he could coordinate an entire battle fleet without breaking a sweat. "We have new arrivals from the Kepler system. Empire destroyed their homeworld last week." Li's jaw tightened. The Empire had been getting more vicious lately, wiping out entire planets just to prevent refugees from escaping. Admiral Quan, who had replaced the failed Commander Rexa, believed in total destruction rather than capture. "Let's go see them," Li said. The training hall was a converted cargo bay, filled with children of every species imaginable. Some had scales, others had fur. A few glowed softly in the dim light. What they all shared was the look of kids who had seen too much war too young, but they were not broken. Under Li's training and the twins' guidance, they had become something new. Human tactics mixed with alien abilities, Earth stubbornness combined with otherworldly creativity. "Today we practice team coordination," Gina announced to the assembled group. "Remember, your differences make you stronger, not weaker." Li watched with pride as the children split into mixed groups. A rock-skinned boy from Titan worked with a girl who could phase through solid matter. Twin brothers who shared a telepathic link coordinated with a young shapeshifter. This was what the Empire really feared, Li realized. Not his guns or his ships, but this. Children from destroyed worlds learning to work together. Learning that family was not about species or planet of origin. "Sir?" came a voice behind him. Li turned to see Captain Dex, now his second in command. The 4-armed alien looked worried. "We have a problem." They walked to the command center, where the main screen showed a tactical display that made Li's blood run cold. Ships, hundreds of them, all bearing Empire markings. More firepower than had ever been gathered in one place. "Admiral Quan herself is leading them," Dex reported. She sent a message. The screen changed to show a middle-aged human woman in a pristine Empire uniform. Her face was cold and perfect, like a statue carved from ice. "Captain Li," Admiral Quan said, "you have become a problem that requires a permanent solution. I am bringing my full fleet to end your little experiment. Surrender the alien children, and I will allow the humans to evacuate first." "When will they arrive?" Li asked. 18 hours, Dex replied. Li looked around the command center. It was full of refugees from a dozen species, all working together. to keep their makeshift family safe. Young adults who had been trained by his children, former enemies who had chosen to stand with them instead. "How many ships do we have that can fight?" he asked. "Maybe 60 that are combat-ready," answered Captain Nera, her scales shifting to worried purple. "Against her 300. "We can't win a straight fight," Minho said, joining the conversation. His telepathic senses were already reaching out, gathering information from their scouts. "But Admiral Kwan is making this personal. She is angry, not thinking clearly." "Angry people make mistakes," Gina added. "You taught us that, Appa." Lee nodded. He had taught them that, along with everything else they would need to survive in. A galaxy that wanted them dead. But he had also learned from them, learned that sometimes the best weapon was not a gun or a ship, but the willingness to treat strangers like family. "Send a message to all the refugee settlements," Lee ordered. "Tell them what is coming. Give them the choice to run or fight." "And if they choose to fight?" Dex asked. Lee looked out at the training hall, where alien children were learning human. Courage and human children were discovering alien abilities, where species that had been enemies for centuries were working side by side. "Then we show Admiral Kwan what happens when you threaten someone's family," he said. "All of someone's family." The next 18 hours would determine whether Lee's promise to a dying mother would survive, whether the idea that love could transcend species would live or die with them. But looking at Minho and Gina, now grown into the warriors and leaders he had always known they could become, Lee felt something he had not experienced in years: hope. The planet they had chosen for their final stand was called Haven. It was a green world with 2 moons and oceans that sparkled like diamonds. More importantly, it was far from any Empire strongholds and had plenty of places to hide children if things went wrong. Lee stood on a hilltop overlooking their main settlement, watching thousands of people prepare for war. They had 3 days before Admiral Kwan arrived, and everyone was working with desperate energy. "The shield generators are ready," Gina reported, landing beside him with barely a sound. At 18 now, she could move through the air for short distances, her alien abilities fully developed. "The younger kids helped me position them around the valley." "Good," Lee said. "What about evacuations?" "All non-combatants are in the underground shelters," Minho answered, appearing on his other side. Lee's son had grown tall and serious, his telepathic powers now strong enough to coordinate their entire defense. "But Appa, many of the parents want to fight alongside us." Lee was not surprised. Over the years, he had seen what happened when you gave desperate people hope and a place to belong. They stopped running and started standing their ground. "Let them," he said. "This is their home too." The settlement below looked like organized chaos. Former Empire engineers were building weapon emplacements alongside alien technicians who understood energy systems humans had never seen. Children, who had grown up in Lee's training programs, were teaching combat techniques to adults who had never held weapons. "Status report," Lee called out as they walked through the command bunker. Captain Dex looked up from his tactical display. "Scout ships report Admiral Kwan's fleet is massive. 400 ships, including 3 battle cruisers. She means to end this permanently." "Our forces?" Lee asked. 80 combat ships," Captain Nera replied, "plus ground defenses and about 2,000 fighters spread across the planet." The numbers were still terrible, but Lee had learned long ago that wars were not won by counting ships. They were won by people who refused to give up. "Minho, what does your strategy look like?" Lee asked his son. The young man activated a holographic display that showed the entire star system. Red dots marked Empire forces, blue dots showed their own defensive positions. "Admiral Kwan expects us to run or hide," Minho explained. "Her plan is simple: surround the planet and bombard us into surrender. But she has never fought against a coordinated family defense." "Meaning?" Captain Dex asked. "Meaning she thinks like an Empire officer," Gina said with a smile that reminded Lee of her mother. "She sees individual ships and soldiers. She does not see the connections between us." Minho nodded. "Every refugee family that has joined us over the years, every child we have trained, every former enemy who chose our side, they are all connected through our telepathic network. When the battle starts, we will not be fighting as separate units. We will be fighting as one mind with thousands of bodies." Lee felt a familiar surge of pride. His children had grown into exactly the kind of leaders the galaxy needed. Strategic. Thinkers who understood that the greatest weapon was not technology, but trust. The Empire fleet arrived exactly when predicted, dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Admiral Quan's flagship led the way, its weapons already charging for bombardment. "This is your final warning," her cold voice echoed across all frequencies. "Surrender the alien refugees, and we will allow human civilians to evacuate." Lee picked up the communicator. "Admiral Quan, this is Captain Lee. We have no aliens here, we have no humans here, we only have family." "Then you have chosen extinction," she replied. The battle began with a massive bombardment from orbit. But the Empire forces quickly discovered that their targets were not where they expected. Buildings that looked important were empty decoys. The real defensive positions were hidden underground and shielded by technology that combined human engineering with alien innovation. Gina led the first counterattack, taking a squadron of young pilots up through the atmosphere to strike at them. Empire's lighter ships, they moved like a dance troupe, each pilot knowing exactly where the others would be without needing radio communication. On the ground, Lee coordinated the defense with the calm precision of someone who had been preparing for this moment his entire life. Refugees who had never fought before stood shoulder to shoulder with veteran warriors, all of them connected by Minho's telepathic network and united by a simple truth: they were protecting their home. The Empire had superior numbers and firepower, but they had never faced an enemy like this. Every time they adapted to one tactic, their opponents shifted to something completely different. It was like fighting a single creature with 1,000 different abilities. Hours passed. Ships burned in the sky above Haven, while ground forces clashed in valleys and forests. The Empire kept pressing forward, but they were paying a terrible price for every meter of ground. And through it all, Lee's extended family fought not just as soldiers, but as brothers and sisters, defending the only home they had ever known. The human way of war, total commitment to protecting those you love, no matter the cost. As the second day of battle dawned, Admiral Quan realized she was not winning. She was barely surviving. 10 years had passed since the final battle at Haven, and Lee could barely recognize the world around him. Where once there had been smoking craters and broken ships, now there were gardens filled with flowers from 100 different worlds. Children played among trees that glowed softly in the evening light, their laughter mixing languages he still could not identify. Lee sat on his favorite bench outside the memorial park, watching a group of youngsters chase each other through the grass. His hair had gone completely gray now, and his hands showed the scars of too many battles, but his eyes were peaceful for the first time in decades. "Grandpa Lee," called out a small voice. He looked up to see little Hannah running toward him, her arms spread wide. She was Gina's daughter, with her mother's blue skin and her father's bright smile. Behind her came 2 more children, Tae, who was Minho's son, and Yuki, an orphaned human girl that Lee had adopted just last year. "Are you telling stories today?" Hannah asked, climbing onto his lap. "Maybe," Lee said with a smile. "What kind of story do you want to hear?" "Tell us about the old days," Tae said, settling beside the bench, "when people fought each other instead of helping each other." Lee chuckled. These children lived in a galaxy so different from his youth that war between species seemed like fantasy to them. They grew up playing with friends who had tentacles instead of arms, who could change colors when they were excited, who spoke in musical tones that sounded like singing. "Well," Lee began, "there was once an empire that believed only certain people deserved to live." As he spoke, he saw familiar figures walking through the garden paths. Minho, now 30, and wearing the uniform of a fleet admiral, was reviewing reports on his portable screen, while his wife pointed out flowers to their newborn baby. His son commanded the largest defense fleet in this sector of space, but he still made time every day to walk in the gardens and remember where they came from. Gina appeared from the other direction, her official robes marking her as Director of Refugee Affairs for the entire system. She was discussing something with a group of newly arrived families, helping them understand how the settlement programs worked. In the 15 years since the Empire fell, she had personally helped relocate over 2 million refugees to new homes. did. The bad people really try to hurt children? Yuki asked, her small hand gripping Lee's shirt. They did, Lee said gently, but they learned something important. When you try to destroy a family, sometimes you just make it stronger. The memorial park around them told the story better than words ever could. Statues honored those who had died fighting for the right to choose their own families. Plaques listed the names of species that had been saved from extinction. At the center stood a simple monument with two names carved in stone, Yuna and her people, who had trusted a human stranger with their most precious gift. The Empire thought blood was the only thing that mattered, Lee continued. They could not understand how a human could love alien children, or how different species could work together. That confusion made them weak. Admiral Kwan's final defeat had come not from superior firepower, but from something she could never comprehend. When her remaining ships jumped away from Haven, they left behind not just a military loss, but the collapse of everything the Empire represented. Word spread quickly through the galaxy. The idea that some people were worth more than others had been proven wrong by a family that refused to accept limits on love. But why did they not just learn to be nice? Hannah asked. Some people take longer to learn than others, Lee said. The important thing is that we kept teaching them, even when they did not want to listen. Minho approached with his family, his son now walking and holding his wife's hand. Appa, the council meeting is in an hour. Are you still planning to attend? Lee nodded. At 75, he was still active in the planetary government, though mostly as an advisor. The real leaders now were people like his children, those who had grown up understanding that diversity was strength, not weakness. What are they discussing today? Lee asked. The Kepler refugees want to establish a new colony in the Outer Rim, Gina said, joining them with her latest group of arrivals. We need to approve the funding and assign escort ships. Sounds familiar, Lee said with a grin. As the evening grew darker, families began gathering for the daily remembrance ceremony. It was a simple tradition, 5 minutes of silence to honor those who had died protecting the right to choose your own family. Adults and children, human and alien, all standing together under the stars. Lee looked around at the thousands of faces surrounding him. Engineers from the old empire working alongside alien scientists. Former enemies now married to each other, raising children who would never understand why their grandparents had fought wars over the color of someone's skin. What started as one desperate promise to a dying mother had become something neither of them could have imagined. Not just a family, but a new way of thinking about what family meant. Not blood or species or planet of origin, but the choice to love someone enough to fight for them. As the ceremony ended and people began heading home, Lee felt a hand slip into his. Hannah looked up at him with eyes that held no fear of the future. Grandpa. Lee, she said quietly, when I grow up I want to adopt children too, all different kinds. That sounds perfect, Lee said, squeezing her small hand. That sounds like family.